What's up, YouTube? You know how to subscribe. I'm gonna have a little fun with this. I think I saw Jonathan, aka Smash, respond to this, and he said he was gonna take the video down because of his criticisms of Karakuni, and he's like he I guess he wanted to save that. Um, I don't know why he's taking it down. That's kind of what he alluded to. I'm going to do a response to just a couple points, and I might have to search around for them, but it shouldn't take that long. Cause and what I'm saying to preface this is, I think Godzilla, brother Ankh at the bottom, I think he went in one big unnecessary circle with when it comes to the race of ancient Egyptians. Like for the most part, Karakuni is going to tell him the same thing that most people have been saying, that I've been saying, the same thing I told Wu Zhao, is that race is objectified when it's personified, when it's drawn up, when it's sculpted, when it's in TV shows, when it's in documentaries. Just like with the Cleopatra Netflix documentary. People said the actress was black, the actress was mixed, but that's how people take it. And it seems like Brother Ankh was trying to make another argument that to me is unnecessary. There's a lot of things that we can hash out. I think it's going to be cool that uh, Saramotep's going to debate Garfield, even though I think we should be past that, like debate him about the race of ancient Egypt, because Karakuni pretty much spells it out exactly how I've been saying when it comes to that. And I had a feeling she might if they had her, because she has said that ancient Egyptians wouldn't have passed the paper bag test in the Jim Crow South. They'd have to sit in the back of the bus. And by our standard today, what else can you go by? I mean, it's not like they had a time machine. And then there may be times when they called themselves black or referred to black colloquially as a collective or as individuals. But there was definitely not going to be a understanding that came a few thousand years after their existence. So we can only take our current understanding and place it into that realm, and that again, when it's personified, then it becomes objective. So I'm going to try to find
I
that
gotta I
point.
gotta hold Dr. Bruce Haynes. I gotta
So they're
There's
introducing.
some things to set up, and just so if
Turn it down.
want to do some extra research, posing a post-colonial one-drop rule that is created in
Oh,
America,
okay,
is a
we're
very
already here, huh?
American chattel slavery created thing, then I think there would be better communication between both sides. Because my answer, if I'm going to go back in time and get in a time machine and answer your question for you, which is were the ancient Egyptians black, I would say with the definition of black, and we use the word African, I mean, all ancient Egyptians are African, but Egypt is a confusing place because it is on the crossroads.
Okay, so this is when she first alludes to it. We're gonna go a little bit further because there's just one point I want to get to
I
in that
feel we're
regard.
going through an anti-patriarchal
I think like, and I'm as I'm going
revolution.
through this, she's mentioning patriarchy, and to be real, I don't think this applies to me. I'm interested in why she thinks it affects arguments with other people. She made the claim that like people want to claim Egypt, and it's through a lens of patriarchy instead of finding common ground. Um, but she also said that like modern Egyptians, she talked about why a lot of them are racist and how they view black as a race and other things. So there was some, uh, and I think she might be mistaking trolls for modern Egyptians, because I don't know that modern Egyptians are as bad as you would see on the internet. It's just like with the tethers. Online, what's promoted on the news channels are African and Caribbean immigrants who wear the cap of Sambo and they behave Samboically. But you meet African and Caribbean immigrants in person and they're usually cool. Now they might fake the funk, but here's the thing: it's just like race. You can only go by what you see and what other people see. That's what they're gonna go by. It becomes a thing once it's objectified, you know. Because a lot of people online are internet trolls. So
But
I'm gonna scroll through.
everyone knows that the most bombs are fired before the armistice is signed. And so right now, those holders of patriarchal power, those billionaires, those people that hold the oil fields, those people.
That might be part of why she has a book on this, and I'm currently reading Malefic Hinti Asante, Asar Imhotep, and damn, I'm reading something else. So it's Asar's book, The Race and Identity of Ancient Egyptians. It's deeper than just saying, well, if they were alive today, they wouldn't pass the color line. It's it's a good damn. I think. Let me see. I don't have it right here. Hold on. Let me grab it. I'm gonna tell you exactly how long it is. I'll be right back. Nah, it's shorter than I thought. It's only like 494 pages because I don't know why he puts the page numbers on the inside. He probably did that on accident. It was like, man, if you really want to find something, or maybe the way he edits and annotates books, it's easier for him. So he figured maybe other people are like that. It's no big deal though. Let me see. I'll keep searching. Oh yeah, I was gonna say that maybe the whole money thing and money power thing, because like African Americans are not patriarchal people, because like we make the same amount of money as our women, so there's no real patriarchy.
About who owns land, who owns culture, who owns and more curiosity and more connection.
Indigenous people and put their own tags on.
Did Egypt. Now, don't misunderstand me. I at
Oh, here it is,
African
right
history
here.
and
I
say
had to
we did
speed
Egypt.
her up.
Now, don't misunderstand me. I am not saying that the ancient Egyptians were not black as we Americans perceive it. They were. The way we define black with mixed race one drop rule, the way we define black as a positive thing, the Egyptians were black. Not maybe all of them according to our definition, but certainly most of them. And if you go to modern day Egypt today and you go to a place like Luxor down in the south, you'll be like, these people are black in our definition, our American definition of what black is, Jamaican definition of what black is. Yes, they are. But when you then use these patriarchal concepts of all or nothing, they're all ours and not yours, then you get into these fights about who owns land, who owns.
See, right there, she's pretty much saying what I've been saying that, and even like when I interviewed Aston, um, and for the most part, he was just presenting. I had some questions near the end, but he did make the point. He's like, yo, you do start to see light skinned people right around Egypt's founding. So it's not trajecting from the Nile or the Nile Valley or the Delta, but with any type of migration, they're going to end up there. So I would never say that Egypt, maybe like in the pre-dynastic times, but not since the merger, was 100% everybody is not going to pass the color line. Look, I wouldn't even say that about ancient the ancient Sudan or ancient Libya or ancient Congo or South Africa. I wouldn't say that about any place because you're going to always have light-skinned people. You're going to always have different hair textures in different regions and people come. And I'm not a big migration person. I think for the most part people migrated out of Africa slowly and back migration was mostly a local event. I don't like using it to explain why you see a weird array of haplogroups, and shoehorning back migration to explain where lineages are, because you could get the same thing with foremigration. But that said, the delta and like Israel, Palestine area, that the Levant region, it's walking distance. And you do start to see light skinned people in those regions based on at least one study. And then with North Africa, I think the light skinned people were even further away. But even by the Middle Kingdom, you start to see images of Libyans that look like Gaddafi. Like they don't look like how we've defined black in America, where it's like a person like Gaddafi has to be mixed. Well, mixed with what? Mixed with one North African tribe and another North African tribe. Maybe a little bit of European, but not enough to change phenotype as we know it. So he's different. And I think that difference clipped into Egypt. Well, I pretty much know it clipped into Egypt. And I'm just saying that it may have happened um, 5,000 years ago instead of 4,000 or 3,000. So I don't have a problem with her saying that it isn't 100%. So nothing she's saying I disagree with. If we use today's definition, ancient Egyptians were black, probably blacker than uh, ancient Rome and Greece were white. And I said that to you know Ch- Chief X. I was gonna call that fool Chief Keef. But I want to get into Ankh's
owns
response.
culture, who owns the past. And those fights can be very bitter. And my own genetic test showed that I have 5% Coptic Egyptian from my mother's Italian Greek
Yep.
side, which is kind of, and that's pretty damn cool.
Now
Everybody,
look
or
at
like
look
a
at
lot of
Ankh.
people.
Look at Ankh about to roll his eyes.
And that's
It's because he played himself. Like he's been on this thing where race doesn't exist, so we can't use today's terms, and he's gonna start debating her using this argument that he's used. But it's such an unnecessary argument because nobody disagrees with that. We're talking about what happens when you see a documentary, and if you see a documentary and all of them look like the modern Egyptian soccer team, you would only say like one or two of them were black, if that. Usually it's like one person who would probably be defined as black as we know it. But if you go by ancient Egyptians, she's saying that black as we know it, it'd be like one or two of them that wouldn't be defined as black. We've been saying that. And really, his whole thing hedging on experts. Who isn't an expert? Like, good luck finding an Egyptologist that studies haplogroups more than me, or more than um, Aston. And me and him disagree on stuff, and we'll debate. Like we're not echo chamber. Um, Find me an Egyptologist that has studied comparative linguistics more than a Sarabotep. Find me an Egyptologist that has studied Kemet colloquially more than Smash Rockwell. Like you're surrounded by experts. There's flaws in their analysis. Uh, Really, I don't think Asar is too flawed, except for I think he probably should recognize that people are pivoting to a colloquial argument when he's doing etymology, stuff like that. And even he'll talk about the mistakes he's made in the past. Um, but though that's where the experts are. Not to say Karakuni is not an expert. She probably has a lot of insight on, and she actually offered some earlier in this on what the hell's wrong with modern Egyptians in black. Like why you have someone like um, Zawi Hawass, you say, well, they were dark, but they were not black, or they were not Negroid. And I'm like, dude, a lot of their statues look just like Garfield and Ankh. Like if you take Egyptian statues, it's basically these three people rolled together. Like the skid is like, but yeah, this is ancient Egypt right here. Um, you mix these three people up. And actually, there'd be more of an East African phenotype that I'm underestimating, but you're close. Like you're not far off.
The anti.
Response.
Okay, here we go. I can tell some problems right now.
What could it like? This is how you really played yourself. What did she say that was problematic? She actually said the same thing that Mary Lefkowitz used to say, that like it's a one drop thing. But the thing is, Mary Lefkowitz could not have possibly meant one drop as in like some white southerner who's 10% African descendants of slavery and doesn't know it. That couldn't be what she meant. So she was talking about one drop as in color line in paper bag tests. Um, Maybe like octoroon and all that jazz, but even then that would have been silly because ancient Egyptians typically painted themselves darker than someone like Meghan Markle. So let's go.
So
Yeah.
you said a few things that most people can't even put together in their mind. So I would like to say this. When you say to me that based off of American standards, I automatically say, well, that's colonizing standards. That
Yeah.
was the standard set by colonizers
Yeah.
and the racist white supremacists. They
Yeah.
were very supremacist in their approach to racialize indigenous people and put their own tags on them. So that's the American standard. That am I wrong? Am I wrong in that? I want to make sure
You are not wrong.
But what difference does it make? She said American standard, and that's what the American standard is. What man? I just saw a video of this lady that dumped soda pop on this kid's head. Like we got a lot of racism that still sees race. Now, you might be smart enough to realize that this is just some stuff we created and nobody's born with a tag on their back. But, you know, the world we're living in is the world she's talking about. That's not going to change because someone has a PhD. She's not going to, like, she might freestyle on some things that she hasn't studied, but that is something that she doesn't need to study. She knew this before she had a PhD. We know it. And you've got to have a level of cognitive dissonance to get to the point where this is even relevant to the discussion. It's not. Like she just outlined the only way black can be defined is how it is now.
Okay, so the museums, the curators say they're indigenous Africans to get away from that because we know we studied Charles Darwin, right? And he
Yeah, the museums are starting to be a little bit more politically correct for a lot of things. So, like, we're not the museums. And even then, museums a lot of times have to show real images of people. So if they have to show real images of people and they don't want people to be like, damn, the ancient Egyptians are black, they just say indigenous Africans, African, in which it's basically the same thing. If you're showing a picture of damn near any of them, I mean, it could be Ramses the Second. Most of his statues, he looks, his face is kind of shaped like either God, what's that brother Anwar Sadat? You know, at times he reminds me a little bit of James Harden, even though he wasn't nearly that tall. These are shorter people. But kind of in that range at times. I think he looks more Asian. His hair looks pretty loose. Um, More like East and North African. But he's still gonna have a hard time crossing that color line. If you look at some of the recreations, of Ramses. Some of them look like a black Puerto Rican, yo. Like he looked like somebody who would use the term money grip. But anyhow, I'm
Basically
gonna keep
saying
going.
that humans come from Africa first. He's one of the first people to report that, right? And he's basically saying that skin color can actually range. So we recognize this, and like you said, the patriarchy. I like the way you say that, the patriarchy, right? I like that. And so,
Man, he is triggered.
but when you make the point to say by American standards they black, I'm cool with that. But then you say something that's real crucial, and they're not going to a Garfield. They're not going to be able to put this together. I know the study you're talking about that said the Egyptians are actually 70%, tied to the indigenous populations, right? They're not going to be able to put them.
I don't know that study. I'll be real. And she said the study doesn't exist anymore. Maybe there was a report of some study from she said it was like 2000, back when DNA tests were ancestry was kind of new, population and genetics. Um, and yeah, like that is, I think he's trying to use that as an out to uh to not play himself. But because I can't speak for that study. I know of a similar study that's old, but I don't think it's that old, and it wasn't released. And the fact that, and this was a study on ancient Egyptians that wasn't released. I talked about this in a video a while back. I researched this shit, and if she's talking about something else that wasn't released, it is obscure as hell. Because I Google the dark web. Like I'm searching all through everything, and I'm finding. I found a study on King Tut that was much older than the one that came out more recently. Like they tested Tut, zipped it up, and then years later tested them again. So let me keep it
Together
going.
because their eyes visually have them thinking that what they're looking at shouldn't be black or shouldn't be African. In reality, right, it's called an evolution, right? It can trick your eyes. So we call it lookership. You shouldn't just look at a person and think you know who they are because you actually can't. Yeah. And like you said, skin change, right? So that's gonna be an issue. Garfield know what I'm saying. 1 minute you said that American standards they black. The next minute you said that's basically the same population because you understand populations are very fluid.
She didn't say it was the same population. She said that 70% have a continuation of a sort. That's a big difference. Because that's like saying that 70% of Americans have a little bit of Native American. And actually, she's not exactly saying that. It's probably, but that's roughly. And if it goes from being 100% to 70%, that can flip phenotype. So, and either way, this is my problem with the term lookership. It's all about how someone looks. If we're talking about how they would be seen today, it's not based on anything but how they look. Duh. Like that's so. Don't create a derogatory term for that, or use. Actually, there's ways where lookership is a problem, but not when we're just talking about something about how somebody looks. That this is all phenotype, physical phenotype, not genetic phenotype. This is all physical phenotype. Because if you're going to go by culture, it's African culture. If you're going to go by region, it's in Africa. So what's next is how do you personify them? And that's when races becomes objective. How do you draw them? How do they look? Whose skin tone are you picking? Whose nose shape are you picking? Are you min-maxing? Are you maxing out? Is it neither? Whose head shape? Because the only way that, from what I've seen, if you go by how ancient Egyptians describe themselves in art, because I've looked at all the art, everything that's online, I've seen 99% of it. What you typically have is a skin tone intermediate between Ankh and Garfield with a stronger red undertone. You might have someone lighter like Karakuni, that's very rare. Typical is between Ankh and Garfield. Facial features, it ranges. Facial features is like if you combine all three of them, that's more typical, and mix in some different East Africans and all that. And you'll have extremes. Oh boy, you'll have people who don't look like. I mean, they're very diverse as far as how they depict themselves, and you can also go by honest recreations, skull shapes, and all that, and you're still talking about people who would be considered black today, and that's really all you can go
And
with.
not less they statues, not like you freeze a human being from 3000 BC and bring them forward. That's the only way it wouldn't change. Population
So
fluid.
so let me also, since you're talking about white supremacy in the United States and how that has formed and shaped our understandings of race and ethnicity and power.
Yes.
This doesn't mean that Africa hasn't received that same generational trauma of white supremacy. They have,
Absolutely.
but in different ways. And a post-colonial Africa has been effed up just in different ways. And so the understanding of how race should work in an Egypt where power is very much assigned to color, and not always, but often is, then you get people who, having been occupied since the Bronze Age collapse by one empire after another, and has only been under native rule since 1950, right?
Anwar Sadat.
Before that. So 1950 was their revolution. Sadat is going to be after that, but native rule for 80 years is not, or 70 years is not going to create the confidence in identity. And let me add to this that if you talk to Egyptians today, there is an understanding that they're indigenous African, having been occupied by West Asians such that even their language was erased.
Okay.
Egyptian language was erased by Arab occupation of elites who came in. 10% of the population is replaced, come in and take.
She also goes on and talks about how they lost their religion. So it's weird, but a lot of like I said, there's a lot of Egypt troll maniacs that twist things around to the point where we have a different idea of what's really going on. So that's my reaction to it. I think this is what's funny is like Chief X was in the comments when I was watching this on Smash's channel, and he's talking about, I'm gonna do a response to this, and this is atrocious. They messed up. How did they mess up? By playing themselves, but you're playing yourself even worse than her. Because I told Chief X a while ago, or others in his presence, that he can't get around white Egyptologists because he's still using oid science. He's using like the Mediterranean race and not even questioning if ancient Egyptians like are Mediterranean people by that standard, because they aren't. I've not I don't think they are even today. Like they're the Mediterranean phenotype is more like Atlas Mountain people. That's more in as far as the majority. Maybe some Southern Europeans, but if you're talking about Mediterranean African, that's not really ancient Egypt. Like the studies on skull shape and physical phenotype, they're more like Tigray. They're more um like northern Sudan mixed with southern Sudan, Uganda, um, Maasai, Somali, uh, Kenya. Like they're very East African, and sometimes they'll be like, well, this clusters with Central African, this clusters with West African, but that'll be a big minority. That'll and and one of the reasons why you'll have so many people saying that ancient Egyptians were Caucasoid is most of them had like most of the people studied, like the remains that were studied, had a Caucasoid leaning measurement or two or three, and then people took that and were like, see, they're Caucasoid. You know, they use reverse one drop rule, and by you could use one drop rule and just say they're a Negroid too. Like, and that's the problem with oid science is it is so easy to move the goalposts because there is no standard. There's no standard where it's like, well, X amount is this, X amount is that, and we're going to stick to that. I've seen people declare that something is African, and because they won't use Negroid anymore, like with Cleopatra's sister, or Sone, I think it's called. She was called. They said, God, it was a woman who was studying her skull said like this is African based on one thing. And there's another video of like a male scientist who comes to that conclusion based on like one measurement. They were like, yeah, this is very common in Africa. She must be mixed. She can't be pure Greek. And the reality is she could have been pure Greek. She could have been Greek because Greeks aren't pure. Um, so she could have been Greek completely and still had like an African shaped head. And the reality is also that they had been in Egypt for a long time. I was going to say they had been in Africa well, of course, but they had been in Egypt for so long that by the time you got to the final Cleopatra, there's not a genealogy that you can follow and say, hey, look, they never married locals. Yeah, they probably married locals. She could very well be mixed. Like she could have. I've seen some recreations of Cleopatra that look like the actress that played her in the Netflix documentary, and I've seen some that don't. Um, Usually, it's the ones that are made by Rome that where she doesn't, and the ones that are made by Egypt where she does. But